The blueprints on my desk were a sanctuary of logic in a world that often felt chaotic. I traced the white line of a load-bearing wall with the tip of my stylus, double-checking the calculation for the third time. Structural integrity was everything. If the foundation was off by even a fraction, the whole building would eventually compromise itself. It was a simple rule one I lived by. Late nights at the office were part of that foundation. The overtime pay was the mortar holding my own life together, specifically the mortgage on the house in Redmond and, more importantly, the tuition for Oak Hill Academy. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the firm's office, a relentless, rhythmic drumming that usually helped me focus. Tonight, however, the gray wash of the Seattle skyline felt oppressive. The clock on the wall ticked past 6:30. Most of the other architects had already gone home to their families. I rubbed my eyes, thinking of Leo. He would be home by now, probably struggling with his math homework or building one of those intricate Lego sets I bought him to assuage my guilt for working so much. Linda would be making dinner. That was the deal. I built the walls. She made them a home. It was an old-fashioned arrangement, maybe, but it was what we agreed upon when she said the stress of her marketing job was too much. My phone vibrated against the mahogany surface of the desk, shattering the silence. The buzz was aggressive, demanding. I glanced at the screen, expecting a client or perhaps Linda asking me to pick up milk. It was neither. The caller ID read, Principal Walters, Oak Hill Academy. A cold prickle of unease started at the base of my neck. Principals didn't call at 6:30 in the evening. They called at noon to report a scraped knee or a forgotten lunch. They called during business hours. I slid the answer icon across the screen. Hello, Mr. Anderson. The voice was stiff, lacking the usual cordiality Principal Walters used when asking for donations. I hope I'm not interrupting your work. No, not at all, I said, straightening up in my chair. Is everything okay? Is it Leo? My heart hammered a sudden, erratic rhythm against my ribs. 1,000 scenarios flashed through my mind in a second. A fall on a playground. A fight. A fever. There is no easy way to say this, Mr. Anderson, Walters said, his tone clipping the edges of the words. The school closed 40 minutes ago. The after-school care staff have all clocked out. The security guard, Mr. Henderson, is currently waiting in the vestibule with your son. I blinked, the words not quite processing. Waiting? I don't understand. Linda, my wife, she was supposed to pick him up. She sent me a text at 4 saying she was on her way. There was a pause on the other end, a silence that felt heavy and judgmental. Mr. Anderson, we have tried calling your wife for the last hour. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. Leo says she told him she was coming, but that was a long time ago. We cannot leave a 10-year-old child unattended, and Mr. Henderson cannot stay much longer. We were about to contact the authorities for a welfare check, but I decided to try your work number first. The word authorities hit me like a physical blow. The police. Child Protective Services. My stomach turned over. No, do not do that, I said, my voice rising. I am leaving right now. I am 20 minutes away. Please, tell Mr. Henderson to wait. I will be there. Do not call anyone. I will give you 20 minutes, Mr. Anderson, Walters said, and the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a heartbeat, the silence of the office now deafening. Linda wasn't there. She hadn't picked him up. I grabbed my jacket and keys, sprinting for the elevator. My mind was a scramble of frantic excuses. Maybe she had a flat tire. Maybe her battery died. Maybe she had been in an accident. The thought of an accident stopped me cold as the elevator descended. Guilt washed over me. I was angry, yes, but if she was hurt, if she was lying in a ditch somewhere in this rain. I ran to my car in the parking garage, the echoes of my footsteps sounding like gunshots in the concrete cavern. I keyed the ignition of my sedan and peeled out, ignoring the speed limit signs as I merged onto the highway. The rain was coming down harder now, blurring the taillights of the cars ahead into long, red streaks. I dialed Linda's number. It rang once, twice, then clicked over. Hi, you've reached Linda. Leave a message. Her voice was cheerful light. It felt like a mockery of the panic tightening my chest. Linda, where are you? I shouted at the empty car. I am heading to the school. Walters called me. Leo is still there. Call me back immediately. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. The wipers thrashed back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the deluge. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Why hadn't she called the school? If she had a flat tire, she could have borrowed a phone. If she was stuck in traffic, she would have texted. Traffic on the I-5 was a nightmare, a river of slow-moving steel. I wove through lanes, earning honks and flashing lights from other drivers, but I didn't care. My son was waiting on a dark doorstep. Every minute that ticked by felt like an hour. I imagined him sitting there, small and confused, watching the other cars come and go, watching the other parents take their children home, wondering why he was the only one left behind. It took me 25 minutes to reach Oak Hill. I pulled up to the curb, the tires screeching on the wet asphalt. The school, usually a bustling hub of activity, was dark and imposing, looking more like a fortress than a place of learning. Only one light was on near the main entrance. I ran through the rain, not bothering with an umbrella. Under the awning, huddled on a bench next to the towering figure of the security guard, was Leo. He looked so small. He was wearing a school blazer, his backpack pulled tight against his chest as if it were a shield. When he saw me, his face didn't light up with relief. Instead, he looked down at his shoes. "Mr. Anderson," the guard said, checking his watch. "You cut it close." "I am sorry," I gasped, wiping rain from my face. "Traffic. Thank you for staying." "I am so sorry." The guard nodded, his expression stern. "You need to sign him out. And you need to have a serious conversation with the administration tomorrow. This cannot happen again." "It won't," I promised, scribbling my signature on the clipboard he held out. I turned to Leo. "Hey, buddy." Leo looked up then. His eyes were red, but he wasn't crying. That broke my heart more than tears would have. He was trying to be brave. "Where's Mom?" he asked, his voice quiet. I crouched down to his level, ignoring the damp cold seeping into my knees. Mom got held up. Something happened with the car, I think. She tried to call, but the lines were down." I lied. It was a smooth, instinctive lie designed to protect him from the fear that was eating me alive. "She said she had a surprise," Leo said, shivering slightly. "She called me at recess. She said she was coming early to pick me up, and we were going to go somewhere special. I told Mrs. Gable I was leaving early, but then Mom never came. I waited by the gate for an hour before Mr. Walters made me come inside. A surprise." The word hung in the damp air. "Let's get you into the car," I said, standing up and placing a hand on his shoulder. "It is freezing out here." Once we were in the warm, dry interior of the sedan, I cranked up the heater. Leo stared out the window at the rain. "Is Mom hurt?" he asked softly. "No," I said quickly. "No, I'm sure she is fine. Just confused or stuck. We will find her." I couldn't take him home. Not yet. If Linda wasn't there, if something terrible had happened in the house, I couldn't let him see that. And if she just wasn't there, I couldn't let him sit in an empty house while I frantically made calls. I pulled out my phone and called my sister, Sarah. She lived 3 towns over, but she was the only one I trusted. "Mark?" Sarah answered on the first ring. It was late for me to be calling. "Sarah, I need a huge favor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have Leo. Linda didn't pick him up from school. I can't find her. Can I drop him off with you for a few hours while I figure out what is going on?" There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "She didn't pick him up?" "Mark, it is 7:30. "I know," I snapped and softened my tone. "I know. Please. I just don't want him dragging around with me while I look for her." "Bring him over," Sarah said immediately. "I will make cocoa." "Mark, is everything okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. The drive to Sarah's was a blur. I kept up a stream of chatter for Leo, asking about his science project, his friends, anything to keep the silence from filling with the dread that was radiating off me. He answered in monosyllables, clearly exhausted and shaken. When we arrived, Sarah met us at the door. She hugged Leo tight, shooting me a look over his shoulder that was a mix of worry and anger. "Go inside with Aunt Sarah, buddy," I said. "I'm going to go find Mom and bring her back." "Okay? You promise?" Leo asked, looking back at me from the doorway. "I promise," I said. As soon as the door closed, the mask fell. I ran back to the car, my hands shaking. Now, the real search began. I drove toward our house. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the streets slick and black. My mind was working like a detective's now, moving past the initial panic into procedural analysis. Scénario A, accident. I had checked the news feeds on my phone at red lights. No major pileups reported on our usual route. Scenario B, medical emergency. I had called the 2 nearest hospitals while driving to Ceres. No Linda Anderson admitted. Scenario C, crime. A carjacking. A kidnapping. This was a scenario that made my blood run cold. I turned into our subdivision. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people move to escape the noise of the city. Manicured lawns, motion sensor lights, safety. My house was dark. Not just dim, dark. The porch light, which was on a timer, was off. That meant the timer had been overridden or the bulb was out. I pulled into the driveway, my headlights sweeping across the garage door. It was closed. I pressed the remote clipped to my visor. The gears ground and the door lifted. The garage was empty. Linda's SUV was gone. Okay, I whispered to myself. She's not here. I parked and went inside through the garage door. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, distinct from the quiet of an empty house during the day. This was a dead silence. The air felt stale. Linda? I called out, flipping on the switch. The kitchen was pristine. Too pristine. Usually, at this hour, there were remnants of dinner prep. A cutting board, a glass of wine, mail scattered on the island. Tonight, the counters were wiped clean. I walked into the living room. Nothing out of place. No signs of a struggle. No broken glass. No overturned chairs. I went upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. The master bedroom was made up, the bedspread smooth. I opened the closet. Her clothes were there. Her shoes were lined up. But something was wrong. I couldn't place it at first. Then I saw it. On her vanity table, the spot where she usually kept her jewelry box was empty. I froze. I walked over and opened the top drawer. Empty. Her passport, which we kept in the safe in the study, was the next thing I checked. I ran to the study, my heart pounding in my ears. The small wall safe was hidden behind a framed print of a building I had designed years ago. I moved the picture. The safe door was ajar. Empty. The emergency cash, about $2,000, was gone. The folder with our birth certificates and passports was gone. This wasn't a kidnapping. Kidnappers didn't stop to empty the safe. I sat down in my leather office chair, the room spinning slightly. She had left. She had taken the cash and her documents. But why? We had arguments, sure, about money, about my hours, but nothing that screamed flight. And to leave Leo? To leave him sitting on a school bench in the rain? That was the part that didn't fit. Linda could be selfish, she could be frivolous, but she loved Leo. Or so I thought. I needed to find her. I needed to know where she had gone. I remembered the Find My Device feature. We shared a family plan. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling with the app. Locating Linda's iPhone. The spinning wheel mocked me. Location unavailable. Last seen 3 hours ago. She had turned it off. Or removed the SIM card. I slammed my fist onto the desk, the pain sharp and grounding. Think, Mark. Think. You build structures. You solve problems. Use the tools you have. I looked around the room. On the small side table, near the window, sat her iPad. She used it for reading and her lifestyle blog that she had started 6 months ago. I grabbed it. It was asleep. I pressed the home button. Passcode required. I tried her birthday. Incorrect. I tried Leo's birthday. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. My pulse quickened. She never locked me out of her devices. We didn't have secrets. Or so I told myself. I tried one more combination. The last 4 digits of her social security number. I had used it once to set up her voicemail years ago. The screen unlocked. I didn't go to her messages. Not yet. I went straight to the thing that governed our lives. The banking app. We had a joint checking account for bills, but the Real Security was the savings account. The Leo's Future Fund. It was money I had inherited from my father, plus bonuses I'd scraped together over 10 years. It was untouchable. It was for college, for a down payment on his first home, for his safety net. I tapped the banking icon. Face ID didn't work, obviously, but the password was saved in the keychain. The app opened. I stared at the balance. $142.50. I blinked, sure I was misreading it. There should have been over $32,000 in there. I clicked on recent transactions. Today, 3:15 p.m., transfer to checking. $32,500. Today, 4:45 p.m., debit card withdrawal, limit override, approved Silver Creek Casino, cashier cage. The air left my lungs. Silver Creek. It was a tribal casino about an hour and a half north, tucked away in the foothills. A place of neon lights and cheap hope. Why would she go there? Linda liked bingo nights with her friends occasionally, maybe a scratch-off ticket here and there. But $30,000? That wasn't a game. That was a catastrophe. I backed out of the banking app and opened her photos. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe her identity had been stolen. The most recent photo in the camera roll had been taken 3 hours ago. It was a selfie. Linda was smiling. Not the forced smile she wore at my company dinners, but a wild, glazed look. She was holding a glass of champagne. Behind her, the blurred background was unmistakable, the flashing lights of slot machines. But it was the foreground that made me sick. Her hand was resting on the arm of a man. I recognized the sleeve of the suit. It was a distinctive, shark-skin gray fabric. I recognized the watch on the wrist, a gold Rolex Submariner that was too flashy for good taste. Brian Cole, our realtor, the man who had sold us this house, the man who had come over for barbecues, the man who had patted me on the back last week and told me the market was tough but manageable. I swiped to the next photo. It was a picture of a stack of chips. High-value chips. The caption, written in bold neon text over the image, read, "It's our time, finally." All in. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Sarah. "Leo is asleep. He asked for you. Did you find her?" I looked at the iPad, at the evidence of my life being dismantled transaction by transaction. The money for Leo's education. The money that represented every late night, every missed weekend, every sacrifice I had made. Gone. Withdrawn at a cashier cage while my son sat in the rain, waiting for a mother who was too busy betting on black. I didn't feel panic anymore. The anxiety that had made my hands shake was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. It was the feeling of steel settling into concrete. I wasn't a husband worrying about his wife anymore. I was an architect looking at a building that had been set on fire by the people living inside it. I typed a reply to Sarah. "I found where she is. I will be there in the morning. Keep him close." I slipped the iPad into my bag. I went to the kitchen drawer and took out the spare key to her car, just in case. Then I walked out to my sedan. The rain had stopped, leaving the world dripping and silent. I looked at the GPS destination, Silver Creek Casino. Estimated arrival, 1 hour 20 minutes. I didn't speed this time. I drove with precise, terrifying caution. I needed to get there safely. I had a transaction to witness, and I had a life to reclaim. The engine hummed, a low growl in the night, as I turned the car north, toward the neon glow that was burning my son's future to ash. She thought she was playing a game. She had no idea she had just made the opening move in a war, and I was coming to end it. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth, a metronome counting down the moments of my life that were rapidly disintegrating. I had been driving for 20 minutes, the city lights fading in the rearview mirror, replaced by the encroaching darkness of the interstate. The rage that had initially propelled me out of the house was beginning to cool, hardening into a dense, cold knot in the center of my chest. It was a dangerous state. Panic made you sloppy. Anger made you reckless. But this coldness? This was clarity. This was the mindset I used when a contractor told me a load-bearing beam had cracked. You didn't scream at the concrete. You assessed the damage. You reinforced the remaining structure. You minimized the collapse. I needed to stop. Driving 80 miles an hour while my mind was scrolling through the wreckage of my marriage was a liability. I wasn't going to help Leo if I wrapped my car around a telephone pole. I saw the blue sign for a rest area approaching, a lonely stretch of asphalt illuminated by flickering sodium vapor lights. I signaled and pulled off the highway, the tires crunching over wet gravel as I parked in the furthest corner, away from the few semi-trucks idling with their engines rumbling like sleeping beasts. I killed the engine. The silence rushed back in, amplified by the drumming of the rain on the roof. I was alone in a metal box, surrounded by darkness, with the glowing screen of Linda's iPad sitting on the passenger seat like a radioactive isotope. I reached for it. My hand hovered for a second. I knew that once I unlocked that screen again, there was no going back. Whatever plausible deniability I still clung to, the faint hope that maybe Brian had coerced her, maybe she was a victim in some way, would likely be obliterated. But I had to know. I had to know the structural integrity of the betrayal. I entered the passcode. The screen blinked to life. I didn't go back to the banking app immediately. I knew the money was gone. The numbers were binary. 0 was 0. What I needed now was the why. I needed the history. In my line of work, when a building fails, it is rarely a sudden event. It is usually a slow fatigue of materials, a corrosion that goes unnoticed until the roof caves in. I opened her email first. The inbox looked normal at a glance. Newsletters from clothing brands, notifications from Leo's school, a few recipes forwarded from her mother. It was the camouflage of a mundane domestic life. But I knew Linda. She was disorganized with physical paper, but she was meticulous about appearances. If there was dirt, it wouldn't be on the surface. I tapped the trash folder. It was full. She hadn't emptied it in weeks. My thumb hovered over a subject line. Urgent. Delinquency notice. Sapphire visa. I frowned. We didn't have a Sapphire visa. I handled the finances. Or at least, I handled the accounts I knew about. I opened the email. It was a final warning for a credit card with a limit of $15,000. The balance was maxed out. Minimum payments had been missed for 3 months. I scrolled down. Another email, this one from a payday loan service. Your application has been approved. Interest rate, 240% APR. The date was from 6 months ago. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't a sudden break. This was a lifestyle. She had been hemorrhaging money for months, perhaps longer. While I was working late to pay for the private school, she was taking out high-interest loans to cover what? I closed the mail app and opened the photo gallery again. I needed to see the timeline. I scrolled past the pictures of Leo, past the pictures of the dinners she posted on her blog. I went to the hidden album. It was a feature on the iPad she probably thought I didn't know about. There were hundreds of photos. The earliest one was dated 8 months ago. It was a selfie of her and Brian Cole. They weren't at a casino. They were at a coffee shop downtown, the one near my office. The caption, added in a bubbly font, read, "Strategy session with the best realtor. Maybe a new house soon?" It looked innocent enough to an outsider. But I looked closer. Brian's hand was resting on her forearm, his fingers lingering. Her smile was too wide, too eager. I scrolled forward. The pictures changed. They became less about strategy and more about proximity. Lunches, dinners, a picture of a bracelet, a gold charm bracelet I had never seen her wear. A little gift for good luck, the caption said. Then came the casino photos. The first one was 4 months ago. Linda standing in front of a slot machine, holding a small cup of coins. She looked thrilled like a child. First time, beginner's luck. Then a week later, back again. Brian says I have the touch. Then 2 weeks later, winning streak. Who needs a budget when you have intuition? The progression was terrifying. In the photos, her appearance began to change subtly. The wholesome, put-together mother I saw at breakfast was replaced by someone with sharper edges. Her makeup became heavier. Her outfits became more revealing, more desperate. In one photo, taken a month ago, she looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes visible despite the filters, but she was holding a fan of $100 bills. "We're going to make it all back," the caption read. One big win. Make it back. That was the phrase that locked it all into place. She wasn't playing for fun anymore. She was chasing losses. And Brian Cole was right there in every frame, a shadow looming over her shoulder, guiding her hand, whispering in her ear. I exited the photos and opened a messaging app. This was the final excavation. The thread with Brian was pinned to the top. She had renamed him Realtor B in her contacts, a flimsy disguise. I started reading from today. 1:30 p.m. Linda, I can't do it, Brian. It's Leo's tuition. Mark will kill me. 1:32 p.m. Brian, don't be dramatic, Lynn. He won't know. We just need a stake. The system I showed you works. We double it. You put the tuition back before the wire transfer clears tomorrow, and you keep the profit. You deserve this. You've been trapped in that house all year. 1:35 p.m. Linda, What if we lose? 1:36 p.m. Brian, we won't. I'm telling you, the table is hot. I have the inside track. Besides, doesn't Mark have a bonus coming? Even if you dip a little, he can cover it. He's made of money, right? That's what you said. 1:40 p.m. Linda, he checks the accounts. 1:42 p.m. Brian, not the savings. He trusts you. Use that trust, Linda. It's your money, too. You raised that kid. You earned it. Just bring the card. I'll drive. I stared at the screen, my grip tightening until the aluminum casing creaked. He trusts you. Use that trust. Brian Cole wasn't just a participant. He was the architect of this disaster. He knew exactly which buttons to push. He played on her insecurity, her boredom, her entitlement. He had weaponized my wife against me. But the text that stopped my heart wasn't from today. It was from 2 weeks ago. Linda, he's asking about the grocery bills. He noticed the withdrawals I made for the interest payments. I think he's suspicious. Brian, calm down. Listen to me carefully. If he confronts you, you turn around. Linda, what do you mean? Brian, you cry. You say he's controlling. You say he limits your access to funds, and it scares you. Linda, but he doesn't. He just wants to see the receipts. Brian, it doesn't matter what the truth is, Linda. It matters what the narrative is. If he tries to leave you or cut you off, we go for the jugular. We claim financial abuse, maybe even emotional abuse. Courts eat that stuff up. We get you the house, full custody, and enough alimony to keep us comfortable. Linda, I can't do that. He's a good dad. Brian, he's a checkbook, Linda. And right now, that checkbook is trying to close on you. Do you want to go back to being a bored housewife, or do you want to live? Choose. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This wasn't just an affair. This was a conspiracy. They had discussed destroying my reputation. They had discussed taking Leo away from me. Not because Linda wanted him, but because he was a leverage point for alimony. I scrolled back to today's messages. 4:15 p.m. Linda, I told the school I'm coming. I'm running late. 4:20 p.m. Brian, forget the school. Let him wait a bit. We are on a streak. You can't walk away from the table when it's hot. The kid will be fine. The guards are there. 4:22 p.m. Linda, okay, just one more spin. Then I go. She chose the spin. She chose the roulette wheel over our son waiting in the cold. I put the iPad down on the passenger seat. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a profound, vibrating intensity of realization. I looked out the window at the rain-slicked pavement. A semi-truck roared past on the highway, a streak of light and noise shaking the car. I had been living in a house of cards. I thought I was building a life, a legacy for my son, but I was just funding a parasite. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of recycled air and old leather. I needed to be careful. If I walked into that casino and punched Brian Cole in the face, which was exactly what every fiber of my being wanted to do, I would play right into their hands. I would be the violent, out-of-control husband they were already scripting me to be. I would lose the moral high ground. I would lose Leo. No, I had to be smarter. I had to be the architect. I picked up the iPad again. I didn't just read the messages, I secured them. I used the export chat function on the messaging app and emailed the entire transcript to my work email, my private email, and my sister's email. I took screenshots of the banking transfers. I took screenshots of the photos in the hidden folder, especially the ones with timestamps showing her at the casino when she was supposed to be with Leo. I created a digital fortress of evidence. Then I saw one last app running in the background, a voice memo app. I opened it. There was a recording from yesterday. It was labeled Plan. I pressed play. The sound was tinny, recorded in a car. I recognized the hum of Linda's engine. Brian's voice. Look, the house is worth what? 800 grand? We have equity. If we push the divorce next month, after we secure this payout, you demand the house. We sell it. That's 400 in your pocket. We move to Vegas. Start fresh. No more rain. No more boring husband. Linda's voice, but Leo, I can't just take him to Vegas. Brian's voice, we'll put him in a boarding school. Or leave him with Mark. Honestly, Lynn, do you really want to drag a kid into our new life? He's Mark's mini-me anyway. Let him deal with the baggage. You're free. Linda's voice, hesitant, I guess. I guess you're right. I deserve to be free. The recording ended. I sat in silence for a long time. The recording was the final nail. It wasn't just theft. It was abandonment. She had already psychologically checked out of being a mother. She was willing to discard our son like an old accessory that didn't match her new outfit. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was a hot, angry tear. I wiped it away roughly. That was the last tear I would shed for Linda Anderson. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. It was 8:15. The casino was still 40 minutes away. I started the car. The engine rumbled to life, a steady, reliable sound. I put the car in gear and pulled back onto the highway. The darkness didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt like cover. I was a ghost moving through the night. They thought they were playing a game against a clueless husband, a checkbook. They had no idea that the man driving toward them was no longer a husband. I was a prosecutor. I was a witness. I was the storm that was about to level their entire world. I merged into the fast lane. The speedometer climbed. I wasn't rushing anymore. I was advancing. I reached for my own phone and dialed my lawyer's personal number. I knew he would be asleep or having dinner, but this couldn't wait. Hello, Mark? His voice was groggy. Robert, I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. I need you to file an emergency ex parte motion for full custody first thing tomorrow morning. And I need a forensic accountant. Mark, slow down. What happened? I'm not slowing down, Robert. I have the evidence. I have everything. She stole the tuition. She abandoned Leo. And she is planning to allege abuse to take the house. I am sending you the files now. There was a silence on the line, the sound of a professional waking up and shifting into gear. Send it, Robert said. I'll meet you at the office at 7 a.m. Where are you? I'm going to get the last piece of evidence, I said, watching the headlights cut through the gloom. I'm going to get the confession. I hung up. The road ahead was straight. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and cold. In the distance, a faint glow illuminated the clouds, the light pollution of the casino complex. It looked like a fire on the horizon. I wasn't going there to save my marriage. I wasn't going there to save my money. The money was gone. The marriage was dead. I was going there to save my son. I pressed the accelerator. The architect was about to conduct a demolition. As the miles ticked down, I replayed the recording in my head. Let him deal with the baggage. Oh, I would deal with it. I would pack it all up. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every minute my son waited in the rain, and I would drop it right on top of them. The exit sign for Silver Creek appeared. I flicked the blinker. The green arrow clicked rhythmically on the dashboard. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time was up. The tires of my sedan crunched over the loose gravel of the overflow parking lot, a sound that seemed deafening in the sudden quiet of the car's cabin. The rain had finally ceased, leaving behind a damp, heavy mist that clung to the asphalt like a shroud. I cut the engine. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, pregnant with the inevitability of what I was about to do. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the structure looming ahead. The Silver Creek Casino didn't look like a place of entertainment from the outside. It looked like a fortress designed to keep reality at bay. It was a sprawling, windowless monolith rising out of the dark pine forest, its facade illuminated by aggressive purple and gold floodlights that stained the low-hanging clouds. It was a beacon of artificial hope in the middle of nowhere. To an architect's eye, it was a monstrosity, a box designed solely to disorient and extract resources. There was no natural light, no sense of time, no connection to the outside world. It was a trap, and my wife was inside. I reached over to the passenger seat and picked up the folder I had hastily assembled, the printouts from the office, the iPad with its damning digital trail. I slipped the iPad into my messenger bag, the leather strap resting heavy on my shoulder. I checked my phone. 9:12 p.m. Leo would be asleep at Sarah's by now. Safe, warm, unaware that his father was about to dismantle his life to save it. I stepped out of the car. The air was biting cold, smelling of wet pine needles and distant exhaust fumes. I locked the car, the chirp of the alarm echoing in the darkness. I began the long walk toward the entrance. The parking lot was a graveyard of ambition. Rows upon rows of cars sat under the buzzing sodium lights. There were battered pickup trucks with rusted wheel wells parked next to gleaming luxury SUVs. It was a democracy of desperation. Everyone here, regardless of what they drove, had come believing they were the exception to the mathematical rule that the house always wins. As I approached the automatic sliding doors, a blast of warm, scented air hit me. It was a cloying smell, vanilla, ozone, and something metallic, pumped in to mask the scent of thousands of people sweating out their anxiety. I stepped inside. The sensory assault was instant. The world of gray skies and rain vanished, replaced by a cacophony of electronic chirps, the rhythmic thud of bass from overhead speakers, and the low, constant hum of conversation. The carpet was a kaleidoscope of swirling patterns, designed, I knew, to keep the eyes moving, to prevent focus from resting on the floor, forcing the gaze upward to the machines. There were no clocks. There were no windows. Time didn't exist here. I moved through the sea of slot machines. I felt like a ghost haunting the living. I watched the people sitting at the terminals. An elderly woman in a windbreaker, mechanically tapping a button with a repetitive strain injury brace on her wrist. A young couple in evening wear, laughing too loudly, holding drinks that sloshed over the rims. A man in work boots, staring blankly at spinning cherries, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. I wasn't here for the slots. The withdrawal limit override and the size of the transfer suggested table games. High stakes. I navigated toward the center of the floor, where the ceiling was higher and the lights were brighter. The high-limit area was roped off with velvet barriers, a VIP section for those willing to burn their livelihoods faster than the rest. I didn't see them at first. The crowd was dense. I walked the perimeter, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. I felt a strange detachment, a coldness that coated my nerves. I was observing a structural failure. I was inspecting the cracks. Then I saw the jacket. Sharkskin gray. It shimmered slightly under the chandeliers. Brian Cole. He was standing behind a woman seated at a roulette table. He was leaning in close, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder, his mouth near her ear. Linda. She was wearing a black cocktail dress I hadn't seen in years, one she used to save for our anniversary dinners. Her hair was done up in a loose chignon, strands falling messily around her face. From this distance, she looked glamorous. But as I moved closer, stepping into the shadow of a decorative pillar, the illusion shattered. She looked frantic. Her skin was pale, a stark contrast to the heavy rouge on her cheeks. Her eyes were wide, darting between the wheel and the pile of chips in front of her. She wasn't holding a drink. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. I took out my phone. I didn't engage yet. I needed the visual. I needed to document the negligence. I hit record. Through the lens of my camera, I zoomed in. Put on red, I heard Brian say, his voice carrying over the din red is due. I can feel it. Linda hesitated. She looked up at him, her expression a heartbreaking mix of adoration and terror. Are you sure? We're down, Brian. If we lose this. We won't lose, Brian said, squeezing her shoulder. His smile was slick, practiced. It was the same smile he used when he told us the water damage in the basement was just condensation. Trust the system, Lynn. Trust me. You're my lucky charm, remember? She nodded, a jerky, puppet-like motion. She pushed a stack of chips forward. Tall stacks. Black chips. $500 each. There had to be $5,000 in that single push. All on red, the croupier announced, his voice devoid of emotion. My stomach twisted. That was 2 months of mortgage payments. That was Leo's orthodontist bill. That was the new computer he needed for school. I watched as the wheel spun. The ivory ball clattered around the rim, a white blur of fate. Linda held her breath. I saw her chest rise and fall rapidly. Brian wasn't looking at the wheel. He was looking at the cocktail waitress walking by, checking out her legs. He didn't care. It wasn't his money. The ball slowed. It bounced, skittered, and settled. Black 22, the croupier said. Linda let out a small, strangled sound. The croupier reached out with his rake and swept the chips away. Just like that. Gone. Damn, Brian said, sounding mildly annoyed, like he'd dropped a quarter. Okay, we double down. Martingale strategy. It has to hit red next. Give me the card. I think it's maxed out, Linda whispered, her voice trembling. The machine said declined last time. Try it again, Brian urged. Or use the other one. The one you said had the emergency limit. I ended the recording. That was enough. The narrative was complete. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and stepped out from behind the pillar. I didn't rush. I walked with the measured pace of a man inspecting a job site. I walked right up to the velvet rope. The security guard looked at me, assessing my wet trench coat and the intense look in my eyes. He stepped aside. I walked onto the carpet of the high-limit area. I stopped directly behind Brian. I was close enough to smell his cologne, an expensive, musky scent that failed to mask the smell of stale tobacco clinging to his suit. The Martingale strategy only works if you have infinite capital, I said quietly. And you, Brian, are playing with a finite resource. Brian spun around. The smile dropped from his face instantly, replaced by a flash of genuine surprise. Linda froze. She didn't turn around immediately. I saw her shoulders stiffen, her entire body locking up as if she expected a blow. Mark, Brian said, recovering quickly. He put on his friendly neighbor mask, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. Hey, buddy, where are you? What are you doing here? We were just... Don't, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise of the casino like a diamond cutter. Do not finish that sentence. Do not call me buddy. Linda slowly turned her chair. When she saw me, the color drained from her face completely. She looked like a ghost. Mark, she breathed. I can explain. Can you? I asked, looking at her. Can you explain why the school called me at 6:30? Can you explain why Leo was sitting on a bench in the rain for an hour waiting for a mother who was 80 miles away? The people at the nearby tables stopped playing. The air around us grew thick with tension. Public shaming was a spectator sport, and we were the main event. I lost track of time, Linda stammered. Tears began to well up in her eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks, streaking her mascara. I was coming. I was going to leave right after this hand. You transferred $32,000 from the education fund, I said, listing the facts like items on a defect report. You maxed out the credit cards. You are sitting here with a man who is not your husband, gambling away your son's future. It was an investment, Linda cried out, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. She stood up, knocking her chair over. I was doing it for us. We're drowning, Mark. You're always working. We never have enough. You check every receipt. I just wanted to help. Brian said. I repeated, shifting my gaze to him. Brian took a step back. Now hold on, Mark. She asked for my help. She wanted to learn how to invest. I was just showing her the ropes. I didn't know about the kid. You didn't know? I asked, stepping into his personal space. I pulled my phone out again and tapped the screen, bringing up the screenshot of the text message. 4:20 p.m. Forget the school. Let him wait a bit. That was you, Brian. You knew. Brian's jaw tightened. He looked around, realizing he was losing the audience. The dealer was watching with crossed arms. The pit boss was approaching. Look, this is a misunderstanding, Brian hissed, dropping the facade. Your wife has a gambling problem, Mark. I was trying to manage it, trying to win back what she lost before you found out. I was doing you a favor. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its sociopathy. A favor, I said flatly. By convincing her to liquidate our savings? By discussing how to divorce me and take the house? I heard the recording, Brian. He's just a checkbook. Isn't that what you said? Brian paled. He looked at Linda, betrayal in his eyes. You recorded me? I didn't mean to, Linda sobbed. It was a dictation app. I forgot it was on. It doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that it is over. I looked at the table. There were few chips left. Maybe $500. The scraps of fortune. Cash out, I said to Linda. I can't, she whispered. I have to win it back. Mark, please. Just let me play one more shoe. I can feel it turning. If we leave now, it's all gone. It's all for nothing. She reached for my hand, her fingers cold and clammy. Please. For Leo. I need to put the money back. I looked at her hand, the hand I had held at the altar, the hand that had held our son when he was born. And then I noticed something. Her wrist was bare. "Where is the bracelet?" I asked. She pulled her hand back as if burned. "What?" "The charm bracelet," I said. "The gold one. My mother gave it to you when we got engaged. She said it was to welcome you to the family. You never take it off." Linda looked down at the floor. She couldn't meet my eyes. "And the necklace," I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. "The sapphire pendant. It was in the safe. I checked the safe, Linda. It's empty." She began to shake, a deep, racking tremor that went through her entire body. "I pawned them," she whispered. The sound was so faint I almost didn't hear it. "You what?" "I pawned them," she screamed, cracking completely. "At the shop down the street. I needed a buy-in. Brian said we just needed a little more to cover the spread. I was going to buy them back tomorrow. I swear." The revelation hit me harder than the money. The money was just currency. It was labor converted into numbers. But the jewelry, that was history. That was my mother's legacy. That was the necklace she wore in her final days. Linda knew what it meant to me. She knew it was the only thing I had left of her, and she had traded it for plastic chips in a windowless room. I felt a door close inside me. The last draft of warmth, the last flicker of the man who wanted to understand, was snuffed out. I looked at Brian. He was checking his watch, clearly calculating his exit strategy. I said to him, "You are done. I have sent the files to your broker. I have sent the files to the licensing board. And I have sent the files to your wife, Jessica. She should be receiving the email right about now." Brian's eyes bulged. "You didn't." "I did," I said. "And Linda? I'm taking the car." "What?" Linda looked up, mascara running down her face in black rivulets. "Mark, you can't leave me here. It's 80 miles. How am I supposed to get home?" "Ask your financial advisor," I said, gesturing to Brian. "Although I suspect he's going to be busy explaining things to his own family tonight." "Mark, please." She lunged for me, grabbing my coat. "I'm your wife. I made a mistake. Don't leave me." I gently but firmly removed her hands from my coat. I didn't shove her. I didn't yell. I just detached her, like removing a vine that was choking a tree. "You didn't make a mistake, Linda," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, hollow, ancient. "You made a choice. You chose the game. You chose him. And you chose to leave our son on a sidewalk." I turned my back on her. "Mark," she screamed. "Mark." I walked away. The walk back through the casino felt different. The noise didn't bother me anymore. The lights didn't disorient me. I felt a strange sense of weightlessness. The worst had happened. The structure had collapsed. The dust was settling. I could hear her calling my name, her voice mixing with the chirping of the slot machines and the murmur of the crowd, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Lot's wife looked back and turned to a pillar of salt. I intended to remain flesh and blood. For Leo, I pushed through the glass doors and stepped out into the cold night air. The silence of the parking lot was a balm. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the damp oxygen. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Robert, my lawyer. "Receive the files. It's enough. We have a solid case for emergency custody. I'll have the papers ready by morning. Try to get some sleep." Sleep. The concept seemed alien. I walked to the car. As I reached for the handle, I stopped. I looked back at the casino one last time. It glowed in the darkness, a temple to greed and ruin. Somewhere inside, the woman I had loved for 12 years was realizing that the house doesn't always win. Sometimes, the house just kicks you out. I got into the car. I placed the iPad on the seat next to me. I started the engine. I had a long drive home. I had to pick up Leo from Sarah's in the morning. I had to tell him that life was going to be different now. It was going to be harder, smaller, quieter, but it was going to be honest. I put the car in reverse, backed out of the spot, and drove toward the exit. I didn't play music. I just listened to the hum of the tires on the pavement. As I merged onto the highway, heading south, I thought about the blueprints on my desk at work. Tomorrow, I would have to redesign everything. Not just the building I was working on, but my entire existence. It was terrifying. But as the casino faded into the rearview mirror, shrinking until it was just a speck of toxic light in the vast darkness, I realized something else. I was the architect. I could rebuild. And this time, the foundation would be solid. I drove on into the night, the road ahead illuminated by my headlights, cutting a path through the dark. The storm was over. The wreckage was behind me. Ahead, somewhere in the distance, was my son, and he was waiting. I pressed the accelerator. I was coming home. The drive back felt shorter, compressed by the exhaustion that was finally starting to seep into my bones. The adrenaline that had sustained me during the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a dull ache in my chest. It wasn't a heart attack. It was heartbreak, physical and acute. I pulled into my driveway at nearly midnight. The house was still dark. The silence that greeted me this time wasn't eerie. It was final. It was the silence of tomb. I walked into the kitchen. I didn't turn on the lights. I navigated by the moonlight filtering through the blinds. I went to the fridge and poured a glass of cold water. My throat felt like sandpaper. I stood there, leaning against the counter, looking at the empty space where Linda's coffee mug usually sat. I needed to secure the perimeter. I went to the front door and engaged the deadbolt. Then, I went to the garage and retrieved my toolbox. It took me 20 minutes to change the locks on the front and back doors. I wasn't a locksmith, but I was handy enough. I had bought the new sets months ago for a rental property I was managing and never used them. Fate, it seemed, had a sense of humor. As I tightened the last screw on the front door, the sound of metal biting into it felt satisfying. It was a physical act of closure. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. I couldn't sleep in that bed. Not tonight. Maybe never again. The scent of her perfume was still on the pillowcases, lavender and vanilla. It made me nauseous. I grabbed a blanket and a pillow from the linen closet and went into Leo's room. His room was a chaotic sanctuary of boyhood. Lego star ships suspended from the ceiling on fishing line, posters of planets, a desk covered in drawings. I curled up on a small twin bed that we used for his sleepovers. It was too short for me, my feet hanging off the end, but I didn't care. I lay there in the dark, listening to the house settle. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Linda. Please come back. I'm scared. Brian left me here. I have no money. The security guards are asking me to leave. Mark, please. I stared at the screen. The blue light illuminated the model airplane hanging above me. She was scared. She was alone. She was facing the consequences of her actions for the first time in her life. A part of me, the part that had promised to protect her, twitched. I could transfer her $50 for a cab. I could call her an Uber. Then I closed my eyes and saw Leo sitting on the bench. I saw the empty safe. I saw the bare wrist where my mother's bracelet used to be. I put the phone face down. I didn't reply. I wasn't her savior anymore. I was just Leo's dad. I pulled the blanket up to my chin. Tomorrow, the legal war would begin. Tomorrow, I would have to look my son in the eye and explain why his mother wasn't there. Tomorrow, I would have to deal with the bank, the credit card companies, the fallout. But for tonight, the locks were changed. The accounts were frozen. The evidence was safe. And for the first time in a long time, despite the loss, despite the fear, I felt a strange, grim sense of peace. The lie was over. I drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of roulette wheels spinning in the dark and a little boy waiting in the rain until I arrived to pick him up. And in the dream, at least I was on time. The sun rose over Seattle with a deceptive brilliance, the kind of crisp, clear morning that usually signaled a fresh start. For me, it signaled the beginning of a demolition. I woke up in Leo's twin bed, my body aching from the thin mattress and the cramping tension that hadn't left my muscles since the previous afternoon. For a moment, just a split second between dreams and wakefulness, I forgot. I reached out, expecting the warmth of the master bed, the soft breathing of my wife beside me. My hand hit the cold, plastic rail of a safety barrier Leo had outgrown years ago. The memory crashed down on me like a collapsed roof. The empty safe, the casino, the look on Linda's face as she watched the roulette wheel spin away our son's future. I sat up, rubbing my face. The house was silent. It was a silence I had engineered the night before by changing the locks and securing the perimeter. It felt less like a home now and more like a fortress. I checked my phone. It was 6 a.m. There were 14 missed calls from Linda. 3 from a number I didn't recognize, likely a payphone or a borrowed cell. There was also a string of texts, oscillating wildly between apologies, pleas for money and vitriolic accusations. I didn't read them. I simply selected all and moved them to a folder labeled evidence. I went downstairs. The kitchen was cold. I made coffee, the mechanical grinding of the beans the only sound in the house. While the coffee brewed, I opened my laptop on the island. I wasn't just an architect today. I was a general contractor for a disaster site. I logged into the credit monitoring service. I froze the 3 credit cards Linda hadn't maxed out yet. I called the utility companies and added a password protection to the accounts, so she couldn't shut off the power or water out of spite. I removed her authorization from the Easy Pass toll account. It felt cold. It felt ruthless. But every time I hesitated, every time a pang of guilt tried to soften my resolve, I looked at the magnet on the fridge, a drawing Leo had made of our family. The stick figure of Mom was smiling. The real version was 80 miles away, having chosen a plastic chip over the artist of that drawing. I drank my coffee black. I needed the bitterness. At 7 a.m., I was in the driveway. I needed to pick up Leo from Sarah's and get him to school. Routine was his armor. I wouldn't strip that away from him. As I backed out, a yellow taxi pulled up to the curb. My stomach tightened. The back door opened, and Linda stepped out. She looked like a ruin. Her cocktail dress from a night before was wrinkled and stained. Her hair, usually so perfect, was a tangled mess. She wasn't wearing a coat, just hugging her bare arms against the morning chill. She looked small, shivering, and pathetic. But I knew better now. I knew that under that fragile exterior was a capacity for betrayal that defied structural logic. She saw my car and ran toward it, waving her arms. Mark, stop. I stopped the car, but I didn't roll down the window. I kept the doors locked. She threw herself against the driver's side glass. Her makeup was smeared, making her eyes look bruised. Mark, please. The key doesn't work. I tried to get in. Why did you change the locks? I am freezing. I lowered the window 2 inches. Just enough to speak, not enough for her to reach in. Mark, thank God, she sobbed, reaching for the handle. Open the door. I had to beg a stranger for cab fare. Brian, that coward left me there. I've been up all night. Just let me in. I need a shower. I need to sleep. She spoke as if it were just a bad argument, as if a shower would wash away the fact that she had embezzled our life savings. You can't come in, Linda, I said. My voice was calm, steady, contrasting with her hysteria. What? She blinked, water droplets clinging to her lashes. This is my house. You can't lock me out of my own house. Actually, I can, I said. I spoke to the sheriff's deputy on the non-emergency line last night when I filed the report about the missing jewelry. Given the theft and the abandonment of a minor, they advised me to secure the property until a preliminary hearing. Theft? She recoiled as if I had slapped her. It's marital assets. You can't steal from yourself. You stole from Leo, I corrected her, and the jewelry belonged to my mother's estate, technically held in trust for Leo. You pawned it. That is theft. The cab driver honked. Lady, are you paying or what? Linda looked back at the cab, then at me, panic rising in her eyes. Mark, I don't have any money. Pay him, please. Just pay him and let me inside. We can talk about this. I'll go to meetings. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't do this to me in front of the neighbors. I looked past her. Mrs. Higgins across the street was watching from her porch, pretending to water her petunias. I'm not paying him, I said, and you're not coming inside. I packed a bag for you. It's on the porch behind the planter. A bag, she screamed, her face twisting into ugliness. I don't want a bag. I want my son. Where's Leo? I want to see my son. You had your chance to see him yesterday, I said, the ice in my chest spreading. He waited for an hour. You didn't show up. You don't get to demand him now just because you have nowhere else to go. I am his mother. Then start acting like it, I said. Call your parents, Linda. Maybe they'll wire you the cab fare. I rolled up the window. Mark, you bastard. You controlling, heartless bastard. She pounded on the glass with her fists. I put the car in reverse. I didn't look at her. I looked at the rearview mirror, ensuring I didn't run over her feet, and backed out of the driveway. As I drove away, I saw her collapse onto the wet grass, sobbing. It tore me apart. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to help her. But I knew that helping her now was hurting Leo. Enabling her was destroying us. I had to be the wall that didn't move. I picked up Leo from Sarah's. He was quiet, eating a piece of toast at the kitchen table. Sarah looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. She knew. I had sent her the files. "Daddy," Leo said, jumping down and hugging me. He smelled like toast and innocence. "Is Mom back?" I knelt down. "Mom is. She's going to stay with her parents for a little while. Buddy, she needs to get some help. She's not feeling well." "Is it because she didn't pick me up?" he asked, his voice trembling. "No," I lied. "It's because she has a sickness that makes her make bad choices. And she needs to go to a doctor to fix it. But we're going to be okay. You and me. We're a team, remember?" He nodded, burying his face in my shoulder. "Okay. Can we get pizza tonight?" "We can get whatever you want," I whispered. I dropped him at school. I watched him walk through the doors, greeted by the same security guard who had waited with him the night before. Mr. Henderson gave me a solemn nod. I nodded back. The exchange was silent, but the message was clear. He is safe now. My next stop was downtown. The office of Robert Vance, family law. Robert was a shark in a tailored suit. We had gone to college together. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to burn the ground, not just win the argument. I sat in his conference room, the mahogany table covered with the printouts I had generated. Robert read the transcript of the text messages, his face impassive. "This is brutal, Mark," Robert said, tapping the paper. "The gambling is one thing. The dissipation of assets is another. But this." He pointed to the text where Brian suggested claiming abuse. "This is conspiracy to commit fraud and perjury. Is it enough for full custody?" I asked. "It's enough for an emergency order," Robert said. "We'll file ex parte today. The judge will sign it by noon, given the evidence of abandonment at the school. Linda will be served with a restraining order barring her from removing Leo from school or the home. But Mark, you need to be prepared. This guy, Brian Cole, he's a grifter. When grifters get cornered, they don't apologize. They attack." "I'm counting on it," I said. "And the finances?" Robert asked. "I met with the forensic accountant you recommended at 8 a.m., I said, sliding a new folder across the table. "It's worse than I thought. She didn't just drain the savings. She took out a second mortgage on the rental property I inherited, forged my signature on the notary documents. Brian Cole was the notary." Robert's eyebrows shot up. "He notarized a forged signature on a loan he brokered?" "Yes." Robert let out a low whistle. "That's not just grounds for a civil suit. That's a felony. That's prison time." "I know," I said. "That's my next stop." I left the law office and drove to the financial district, the headquarters of Prestige Realty. The agency where Brian Cole was a top broker was located in a glass and steel tower that screamed legitimacy. Brian traded on trust. He was the friendly face on the billboards. I walked into the lobby. I didn't look like a vengeful husband. I looked like a client. I was wearing my site visit blazer, carrying my leather messenger bag. "I have a meeting with Mr. Sterling," I told the receptionist. Mr. Sterling was the owner of the agency. "Your name?" "Mark Anderson. I have information regarding a liability issue with one of his agents." 5 minutes later, I was in Sterling's office. He was an older man, silver-haired, radiating old money and caution. "Mr. Anderson," Sterling said, shaking my hand. "My assistant said this was urgent. Something about Brian Cole?" "I'm afraid so," I said. I sat down and opened my bag. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I laid out the documents. "This," I said, placing the first sheet down, "is a record of a transfer of $30,000 from my family accounts to a casino facilitated by your agent during business hours." Sterling frowned. "That's a personal matter, Mr. Anderson. While unfortunate." "This," I interrupted, placing the second sheet down, "is a text message exchange where Brian Cole advises my wife to liquidate equity in our home, which he sold us, to fund a gambling habit, explicitly discussing how to manipulate the market value for a quick sale." Sterling's frown deepened. He picked up the paper. "And this," I said, placing the final document, the forensic accountant's report, on the desk, "is proof that Brian Cole notarized a forged signature on a home equity line of credit application for a property he manages. That is fraud, Mr. Sterling, And since he used company letterhead and email, Prestige Realty is vicariously liable. The color drained from Sterling's face. He knew exactly what this meant. It meant lawsuits. It meant the loss of their license. It meant a PR nightmare. I'm filing a police report this afternoon, I said, standing up. I thought you would want a heads up so you can distance yourself. Mr. Anderson, Sterling said, his voice shaking slightly. May I keep these copies? They are yours, I said. I have plenty more. I walked out of the office. I didn't see Brian. I didn't need to see him. I knew that within the hour, security would be escorting him out of the building with a cardboard box. I had just cut off the head of the snake. Without his job, without his reputation, Brian was just a man with gambling debts and a criminal record waiting to happen. I got back to my car. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of the execution. It was surgical. It was clean. Then my phone rang. The caller ID said unknown. I answered. This is Mark. You think you're smart, don't you? The voice was ragged, angry. Brian. I think I'm thorough, Brian, I said calmly. I just got fired, he spat. Sterling kicked me out. Said he's calling the licensing board. You ruined my life. You ruined it yourself, I said. I just turned on the lights. Listen to me, you little architect puke, Brian hissed. You think this is over? You think you can just walk away? I know things about you. You know nothing about me. I know what Linda told me, Brian said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. She told me about your temper. She told me how you get when you drink, how you push her around. I don't drink, Brian, and I have never touched her. It doesn't matter. Brian laughed, a frantic, jagged sound. She'll testify. We'll go to the cops. We'll say you beat her. We'll say that's why she ran away to the casino. She was escaping domestic violence. Who do you think they'll believe? The crying mother or the cold, controlling husband who locked her out in the rain? I sat in the silence of the car. This was the move Robert had warned me about. The scorched earth tactic. If they couldn't win the money, they would destroy the man. You want to play that card? I asked softly. I'm going to bury you, Brian said. Unless you drop the lawsuit. Unless you agree to a settlement. We want a house, Mark. And we want cash. Or else you're going to be known as a wife beater all over Seattle. I have press contacts. I'll splash your face on every blog in the city. He was desperate. He was flailing. But he was dangerous. A lie, once told, is hard to untell. Even if I won in court, the stigma could cost me my job, my clients, my standing at Leo's school. Meet me, I said. What? Meet me. If you want a settlement, let's talk. Face to face. I'm not coming to your house. The coffee shop on 4th and Pike, I said. 30 minutes. Public place. Bring Linda, if she's with you. She's with me, he said. She's a mess, thanks to you. We'll be there. And bring your checkbook. He hung up. I stared at the phone. He thought he had trapped me. He thought fear of scandal would make me fold. I reached into the glove compartment. I took out a small USB drive. Then I opened the app on my phone, connected to the dash cam in Linda's SUV. I had pulled the memory card the night before, but the cloud backup was accessible. I found a file I needed. The one from 2 days ago. The one where the car was idling in the driveway while I was at work. I listened to it one more time through the car speakers to be sure. Brian, what about the kid? If we frame Mark, the kid goes into foster care until it's sorted. Linda, I don't care. I really don't. He's so exhausting, Brian. He's always asking questions. If he goes to foster care for a few months, maybe it's a break for me. We can go to Cabo. Brian, exactly. We use the abuse allegation to clear the board. The kid is just collateral damage. It was sickening. It was the sound of two souls that had rotted from the inside out. But it was also my shield. I drove to the coffee shop. I was 5 minutes early. I ordered a green tea. I sat at a corner table, my back to the wall, watching the door. They walked in 10 minutes late. Linda was wearing Brian's suit jacket over her dress. She looked like a ghost of the woman I married. Brian looked manic, his tie loosened, his eyes darting around the room. They sat down opposite me. Linda wouldn't look at me. She stared at the table. So, Brian said, leaning in, trying to look intimidating. Here's the deal. You sign over the house. You agree to $5,000 a month in alimony. And you drop the fraud claims. In exchange, Linda doesn't go to the police station right now to show them the bruises she's about to discover on her arm. I looked at Linda. Is this what you want, Linda? You want to accuse me of hitting you? You know it's a lie. She flinched. I have to survive, Mark. You left me with nothing. You had everything, I said. You threw it away. Cut the crap, Brian snapped. Yes or no? Or do I make the call to my reporter friend right now? He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over a contact. I placed my phone on the table between us. Before you make that call, Brian, I want you to listen to something. I pressed play. The audio was crisp and clear in the quiet coffee shop. Brian, the kid is just collateral damage. Linda, I don't care. I really don't. If he goes to foster care, maybe it's a break for me. The color drained from Brian's face so fast he looked like he was about to faint. Linda let out a gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. Brian stammered. That's illegal recording. You can't use that. Washington is a two-party consent state. Actually, I said, my voice dead calm. That was recorded on the internal dash cam of the vehicle registered in my name. You were in my car. There is no expectation of privacy in a vehicle that doesn't belong to you. And furthermore, the crime fraud exception applies here. You were conspiring to commit a crime, filing a false police report and child abandonment. That recording is admissible. I leaned forward. But even if it wasn't admissible in court, I said, locking eyes with Brian, imagine what happens if I play this for the police when you try to file that report. Imagine what happens if I play this for the judge at the custody hearing. Imagine what happens if I post this on the internet. Brian's hand shook. He slowly lowered his phone. You are done, I said. Both of you. There will be no house. There will be no alimony. There will be no settlement. I looked at Linda. She was weeping silently now, rocking back and forth. Linda, I said, I'm going to get full custody. You're going to get supervised visitation, maybe if you complete a rehab program. But if you ever try to threaten me or Leo again, if you ever listen to this man again, I will release this tape. And you won't just be broke. You'll be a pariah. No one will ever look at you again without hearing you say that you wanted your son in foster so you could go to Cabo. She looked up at me, and I saw the realization hit her. She had lost the narrative. She wasn't the victim. She was the monster. Mark, she whispered. I didn't mean it. I was high. Goodbye, Linda, I said. I stood up. Brian didn't move. He sat there, staring at the table, realizing that his blackmail attempt had just turned into a confession. I walked out of the coffee shop. The rain had started again, a light, cleansing drizzle. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. I checked my watch. It was 2:30 p.m. School ended in 30 minutes. I got in my car. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt heavy. Destroying your own life, even when it's necessary to remove the rot, is exhausting work. But the foundation was clean now. The termites were gone. I drove toward Oak Hill Academy. I was going to be the first parent in the pickup line. I was going to be there before the bell rang. As I drove, my phone buzzed. A text from Robert. Motion granted. You have full temporary custody. Restraining order issued. We serve them tonight. I put the phone down. I pulled up to the school. The familiar brick building looked different today. It didn't look like a place of judgment anymore. It looked like a sanctuary. I parked the car and walked to the gate. I stood exactly where Leo had stood yesterday. I waited. When the bell rang and the doors opened, a flood of children poured out. I scanned the faces, and then I saw him. He walked out, looking anxious, scanning the crowd. He was looking for a problem. He was expecting disappointment. Then he saw me. His face broke into a smile that hit me in the chest with the force of a wrecking ball. He ran toward me. Dad, I caught him. I lifted him up, ignoring the pain in my back, ignoring the fatigue. I'm here, buddy, I said into his hair. I'm right here. The war wasn't over. There would be court dates. There would be crying. There would be the long, slow work of healing. But the immediate threat was neutralized. The enemy had been routed. I held my son, and for the first time in 2 days, the architect rested. The building was still standing. The fluorescent lights of the King County Family Court waiting area buzzed with a sound that was almost imperceptible, a high-frequency hum that seemed to vibrate directly against the base of my skull. It had been 90 days since the night of the casino. 90 days of legal filings, temporary orders, forensic accounting audits, and silence in the hallways of a house that was too big for two people. I sat on a stiff wooden bench, my hands clasped between my knees. I was wearing my best suit, a charcoal gray wool that usually made me feel armor-plated, but today felt heavy. Beside me sat Robert, my lawyer. He was scrolling through emails on his phone, the picture of professional detachment. To him, this was a Tuesday. To me, it was the structural inspection of my entire life. 3 months ago, I had been an architect trying to keep a crumbling facade from falling. Today, the demolition was almost complete. We were just here to sweep up the debris. Mark, Robert said, not looking up from his screen. Remember the strategy. Short answers. Facts only. Don't get emotional. The judge has read the briefs. She has seen the financial records. She has heard the audio. This is a formality, but formalities matter. I nodded. I knew the plan. I had lived the plan every waking second since I walked out of that coffee shop. Across the hallway, sitting on a similar bench, was Linda. She looked different. The woman who had once spent hours perfecting her hair for a grocery run was gone. In her place was someone faded. She wore a modest blue dress that I recognized from 5 years ago, something she used to wear to church before we stopped going. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at a scuff mark on the linoleum floor, picking at the cuticle of her thumb. She was alone. Brian Cole was nowhere to be seen. The bailiff opened the heavy oak doors. All rise. We filed into the courtroom. It smelled of floor wax and old paper, the scent of bureaucracy. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table. I didn't look back at Linda. I focused on the judge, a woman with graying hair and glasses perched on the end of her nose, who looked like she had seen every possible variation of human disappointment. The proceedings began with a dry recitation of case numbers. Then, Robert stood up. Your Honor, he began, his voice smooth and authoritative. We are asking for the temporary orders regarding sole physical and legal custody to be made permanent. We are also asking for the financial judgment regarding the dissipated assets. Linda's lawyer, a court-appointed attorney who looked overworked and underprepared, stood up. Your Honor, my client acknowledges the mistakes made regarding the finances. However, she is the mother. She has completed 30 days of outpatient counseling for gambling addiction. She requests joint custody and a rehabilitation plan. The judge looked over her glasses at Linda. Ms. Anderson, you admit to taking the funds from the child's education trust? Linda stood up. Her voice was shaky. Yes, Your Honor, but I intended to pay it back. I got bad advice. I was manipulated. It was the same refrain she had used for 3 months. It was never fully her fault. It was Brian. It was the stress. It was me working too much. The judge picked up a file. I have the forensic accountant's report here. It details a pattern of spending that goes back 2 years, culminating in the complete liquidation of the family savings and the theft of heirloom jewelry. And I have a transcript of a recording made in the family vehicle. The room went silent. The recording. The dashcam audio had been the nuke that ended the war before it truly began. The judge read from the paper, her voice flat. In this recording, you are heard agreeing with a Mr. Cole that your son, Leo, would be collateral damage in a scheme to allege false abuse against Mr. Anderson. You're heard saying that if the child went to foster care, it would be a break for you. Linda put her hands over her face. I didn't mean it, she sobbed. I was just talking. I was scared. The judge lowered the paper. Ms. Anderson, courts see many things. We see addiction. We see financial ruin. We try to have compassion for those struggles. But the willingness to weaponize the child welfare system against a fit parent and the stated indifference to your child being placed in state care. That speaks to character. That speaks to fitness. The gavel didn't bang. It just rested in the judge's hand. Judgment for the plaintiff, the judge said. Sole legal and physical custody awarded to the father, Mark Anderson. The mother is granted supervised visitation for 2 hours, twice a month, at a state-approved center, contingent on continued negative drug tests and proof of employment. The request for spousal support is denied with prejudice. It was over. In 10 minutes, the legal bindings of a 12-year marriage were severed. I felt a rush of air leave my lungs. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. Robert patted me on the shoulder. Good outcome, Mark. Clean sweep. We walked out of the courtroom. The hallway felt brighter, though the lights hadn't changed. Mark. I stopped. Linda was standing by the water fountain. Her lawyer had already rushed off to another case. She looked small. I turned to face her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel the burning need for justice I had felt that night at the casino. I just felt a profound, exhausting pity. I'm sorry, she whispered. I looked at her. I really am. I lost everything. You didn't lose it, Linda, I said, my voice steady. You gave it away. You traded it. She wiped her eyes. How is he? How is Leo? He's healing, I said. He asks about you less often now. That hit her. I saw the flinch. Can I call him? She asked. Just to say goodnight? I thought about the nights Leo had cried himself to sleep in the first week, asking why Mom wasn't there. I thought about the therapy sessions where he built walls out of blocks to keep the bad feelings out. The judge set the rules. Linda, I said. Supervised visits. You can coordinate with Robert, but you can let me call. She pleaded. You have the power. Please, Mark. I'm living in my parents' basement. I'm working at a diner. I have nothing. Just give me this. I looked at the woman who had planned to send me to jail with a lie, so she could go to Cabo. I have the power, I agreed, and my job is to protect him. Stability is what he needs right now. Not a phone call from a mother who might disappear again when the next lucky feeling hits. I turned and walked toward the elevators. Mark, she called out, her voice cracking. It was Brian. He made me do it. I didn't stop. It didn't matter who struck the match. She was the one who poured the gasoline. The drive from the courthouse to the house in Redmond was a journey between two worlds. I was leaving the legal battlefield and returning to the physical remnant of the disaster. The house was sold. We were closing in 2 days. I pulled into the driveway of the place I had designed. It was a beautiful structure, mid-century modern influence, open floor plan, plenty of natural light. I had been so proud of it. Now it just looked like a container for bad memories. I walked inside. The echo was profound. Most of the furniture was already gone, sold, or donated. The staging company had removed their neutral sofas and abstract art. All that was left were a few boxes in the hallway and the cleaning supplies. I walked through the empty rooms. The living room where we had put up the Christmas tree. The kitchen where Linda had once made pancakes before she stopped getting out of bed before noon. The study where the safe had been emptied. I went upstairs to Leo's room. It was bare, the walls stripped of his posters. The only thing left was a small smudge of blue paint on the baseboard from a craft project years ago. I sat down on the floor. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive anymore. It was the silence of a blank page. I took out my phone and checked the news. I had a Google alert set up for Prestige Realty and Brian Cole. It was a habit I needed to break, but today I indulged one last time. There was a new article from a local business journal. Local realtor indicted on multiple counts of fraud and forgery. I scanned the text. The police investigation, spurred by the documents I had provided to Sterling, had uncovered a web of scams. Brian hadn't just targeted Linda. He had been skimming escrow accounts, forging loan documents, and running a Ponzi scheme with investment properties for years. He was facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison. His wife had filed for divorce. He was currently being held without bail because he was considered a flight risk. I turned off the phone. There was no joy in reading it, just a grim satisfaction that the math had finally balanced out. Brian had treated people like variables in an equation he could manipulate. He forgot that variables can fight back. I stood up and grabbed the last box. It contained the few personal items I had kept from the marriage, photo albums from before the gambling started, Leo's baby book, a few keepsakes. I walked out the front door and locked it for the last time. I dropped the keys in a lockbox for the new owners. They were a young couple, expecting their first child. I hoped the house would be better to them. I hoped they would fill it with honesty. I got into my car and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. The new apartment was in a different part of the city, closer to Leo's school. It was a 2-bedroom unit in a brick building. It was a third of the size of the house. The kitchen was a galley, tight and functional. The living room could barely fit a couch and a TV, but it was warm, and it was ours. I parked in the underground garage and took the elevator up. It was 4 p.m. Leo was at the table, doing his homework. The babysitter, a nice college student named Sarah, no relation to my sister, looked up and smiled. "Hi, Mr. Anderson. He's just finishing his math." "Hey, Dad," Leo shouted, dropping his pencil. I walked over and hugged him. He felt solid. The anxiety that used to vibrate off him, the constant checking of the window to see if Mom was coming, had lessened. He was sleeping through the night again. "How was the meeting?" Leo asked. He knew I had court, but he didn't know the details. He just knew it was about rules. "It went well, buddy," I said, loosening my tie. "The judge said we're going to stay a team. Just you and me. And we're going to stay in this apartment." "Cool," Leo said, turning back to his worksheet. "I like this place. The internet is faster." I chuckled. Prioritization. I paid the sitter, and she left. It was just us. The evening routine, the new foundation of our lives, began. I cooked dinner. Tacos. Simple, messy, and Leo's favorite. We stood in the small kitchen, chopping lettuce and grating cheese. "Dad?" Leo asked, pausing with the cheese grater. "Yeah? Is Mom ever coming back?" "Not to visit. I mean to live." I turned down the heat on the stove. I wiped my hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. I couldn't lie to him. I had promised myself, the night I found him in the rain, that I would never lie to him again. "No, Leo. She's not coming back to live with us." "Why?" "Because." I searched for the right words. Because trust is like a plate. When it breaks, you can glue it back together, but it's never going to be strong enough to hold food again. Mom broke the plate, and she needs to fix herself before she can try to hold anything. Leo nodded slowly. He seemed to process this with the terrifying adaptability of children. "Okay, can I have extra cheese?" "You can have all the cheese," I said, ruffling his hair. We ate dinner at the small round table near the window. Outside, the rain had started again, the familiar Seattle drizzle. But inside it was dry. The lights were warm. After dinner, we sat on the couch to watch a movie. It was one of those animated films about superheroes. Leo was leaning against my side, his head on my shoulder. My phone, sitting on the coffee table, lit up. I saw the name. Linda. My heart skipped a beat. She was calling. Despite the judge's order. Despite everything I had said. I looked at the phone. Leo looked at the phone. He saw the name. The phone rang. And rang. I didn't reach for it. I stayed perfectly still, letting the moment hang in the air. I wasn't going to forbid him from answering, but I wasn't going to hand it to him either. This was the test. Leo stared at the screen. He saw the name of the woman who had left him on a bench. The woman who had chosen a spinning wheel over his safety. He looked at me. His eyes were clear, dark, and intelligent. "She's not supposed to call, is she?" he asked. "No," I said softly. "She's not." Leo looked back at the phone. The ringing seemed to get louder, filling the small room. It was a ghost from the past trying to haunt our present. Then Leo reached out. My breath hitched. He pressed the side button. The ringing stopped. The screen went black. He silenced the call. He didn't say anything. He just leaned back against my shoulder and pointed at the TV. "Dad, look, the robot is about to fly." I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my chest for years. I pulled him a little closer. "Yeah, buddy, I see it." We finished the movie. I put him to bed, tucking the duvet around him. We had set up his room with his models and his posters. It looked like his space. "Good night, Dad," he mumbled, already half asleep. "Good night, Leo. I love you." "Love you too." I closed the door, leaving it cracked just an inch, allowing a sliver of light from the hallway to stand guard. I went into the living room and walked to the window. I looked out at the city. Thousands of lights, thousands of lives. My phone buzzed again. A text from Linda. "Please, just one word." I picked up the phone. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hate. I just felt resolved. I blocked the number. It was the final brick in the wall. The perimeter was secure. I walked over to the small desk where I had set up my workstation. I turned on the lamp. Spread out across the surface were the blueprints for a new project. It wasn't a skyscraper or a casino. It was a library, a community center, a place designed for learning, for safety, for quiet growth. I picked up my stylus. I looked at the lines, the load-bearing walls, the foundation. I was 40 years old. I was a single father. I was renting an apartment. My savings were gone. My marriage was a crater. But as I traced the line of the foundation on the screen, my hand was steady. The storm had passed. The rubble was cleared. We were still here. And now, finally we could build.